Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us this evening. This is part of the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Auburn Arts Commission. And tonight we're here to discuss a very important part of what the Commission does, and that's public art. In Auburn, we're very proud of our rich history of public art, our philosophy of including public art in construction, and that's something, as I think most of these artists are well aware of, that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes some patience and education and understanding of how important integrated art is to a public building or any structure throughout the city. So we have a good mix now. We're getting to a good balance of integrated art as well as freestanding art, and we're very proud of our collection. So I think you're going to find this very interesting. You're going to learn a lot. I'd like to next turn it over to Nancy Colson. Nancy's the current chair of the Auburn Arts Commission. And it's really people like Nancy with an understanding of the arts and a commitment to what art can do for a community that has kept the Arts Commission strong and thriving for 25 years. If I may, I want to close with a quote because I'm known as a quote lady. It says, "Continue to expose yourself to new ideas, trust your instincts, and think for yourself. Make art, or at least value it." With that, Nancy Colson.
Thank you, Lynn. And I want to just take a moment to thank the mayor and council for supporting arts in this community over the years. And it's exciting to be able to celebrate 25 years of art. And today is about our commitment to public art. And public art, there was a presentation to staff earlier by Kath Bruner from Public Art and For Culture, talking about how art makes spaces more accessible, how people feel welcomed by spaces that are enriched by art. And it's an important lesson to know. It's an important thing to think about. And I wanted to show everyone, we're really proud of our new public art brochure that describes the pieces, tells where they're located so people can seek them out and enjoy them. We're now going to hear from the artists who have created some of these pieces in our city. And I'd like to introduce Heather Dwyer, who's arts coordinator, program coordinator for Culture. So please welcome Heather Dwyer, and she'll introduce the panel.
Thank you. So I want to thank Nancy, of course. Nancy's been a great advocate for public art as well as Lynn, and so it's really a great amenity for Auburn to have them in their community. I would also like to thank the City of Auburn for celebrating their 25th anniversary, but also inviting us all to be here to talk about the history of public art in their city. I think they should be commended for having this program. It's invaluable. And finally, I'd like to thank all the artists for being here. It's a really great turnout, and I think we'll have a lot of good things to talk about. And I'll try to keep the conversation going. We'll have Q&A at the end, but we have a lot of things to tell you today. Public art programs began in the United States in Philadelphia in 1959, and since that time, there are about 300 cities that now have public art programs, and Auburn, fortunately, is one of them. Since the initial establishment of public art programs throughout the country, artists have been able to move out of galleries and museums and into public settings, into their communities. Today, we recognize that public art can make ordinary spaces extraordinary. And art can provide a community with a sense of identity and a uniqueness so that they are not the cookie-cutter city. Public art can express the stories of a community, and we'll talk about that today, engage citizens in creative solutions, create jobs, and it also benefits businesses. A lot of times we don't think of that benefit, but certainly art walks, nights at theaters, special events that are done in our parks, those draw people into cafes and restaurants, so it benefits additional businesses in our communities as well. Being a public artist is not an easy job, and these folks know it better than I do. I'll introduce along the table here. First we have Garth Edwards. Next to Garth we have Daryl Grothaus. Is that how you say it?
Grothaus.
Great. And then we have Virginia Paquette, and Susan Zocola, and Michelle Van Slyke. Then we have Philip Levine and Meg Pettibone, Gerard Sudakawa, and Ingrid Lottie. So again, thank you all for coming this evening. How did the location influence the design or concept of the artwork? Philip, do you want to start?
When I go out to the studio, I deal with the ideas that I have in mind, and it's when you encounter a public art commission that you have suggestions of what the commission and the community want. And I was given the specific location of the entrance, and this is always a good triggering way to begin a sculpture. I always feel I work mainly from intuition, but intuition comes from experience, education, interest, and all the other variables. I don't overthink the sculpture in that sense, but in my life I've been very concerned about what a threshold is, what a passage is, what an entrance is. And to have this sculpture at the entrance to the park struck a very strong chord in me in terms of what do you gain by entering a park? What do you gain by going through a passage? You encounter different emotions, different community responses, which is a very strong thing in parks, that you're together with other people. You either come as an individual, you come as a group, but you interact with what the park has to offer. And in doing this, then I let more or less some aesthetic interests flow through the idea of what is a passage. It could have been a door, or in some of the Japanese culture, the torii gate, which signifies going through something. I think passages and thresholds have a lot more meanings than you can illustrate in any work of art. And I found that it was very much of a wonderful way to start, knowing that I was dealing with the entrance to a community.
And Gerard, I'd like to ask you, because I know your work here is incredibly popular, was there something about the setting that inspired you to create the work that you did?
Well, first off, Game Farm Park, you're kind of a confusing name because you think, well, there's a lot of games going on out there. And then I realized, or I found out later on, that there used to be an actual game farm there. And it turned into a park full of people playing games, which was really fun for me because, it's a real active park. A lot of participation, a lot of young people, and a lot of energy going on. And I think, to me, it's very important that citing the work is probably half the battle of getting a piece accepted or visually functional in an environment. I felt that visually you wanted to create some place that you could really have good lines of sight, and I thought that was probably one of the most important things to make this accessible to a lot of kids or a lot of adults. And they talk about integration, landscape and architecture and all that, but I think the other third element, which people don't always realize, is the integration of the public and the people that participate and view or interact with the artwork.
Yeah, very true. And Daryl has a really interesting story, I think, because he didn't really intend to be a part of the public art collection.
Right. It was a kind of a chance accident. I had originally applied for the City Hall Gallery I have a series of 50 called the Necropolis series, and these are 2 foot by 3 foot, 2-inch thick tablets of hydrostone plaster, 50-pound pieces. And they're all cemetery statuary photographs transfer printed on these tablets. The commission liked the work but could not really find a way to hang it in the City Hall Gallery. So I begged them to come out and check it out anyways, and maybe we could find a solution. And Megan Myers came out to my house and had a brainstorm that Auburn manages a cemetery, Mountain View Cemetery, this really beautiful cemetery a little bit outside of downtown. And had a brainstorm that we could do 15 to 18 of these shown in the administrative building at the cemetery. So I believe it was June 2007, we mounted a show and had a guest speaker who has written a really wonderful book, Shannon Applegate, on cemeteries and cemetery iconography. And it was a big hit, and the Craig Hudson, who manages the cemetery, fought really hard to purchase one of the pieces that when you first come in the administrative building. There it is. It meets you when you first come in the wall. And the wonderful thing was that it kind of come full circle. The project started with just photographing cemetery statuary, and I had wanted to find a way to print them on something more substantial that felt like stone. And that's how the project kind of just evolved step by step by step. And so having it mounted at the cemetery itself, that show, it had come full circle back to where the project actually was birthed, back in a cemetery. And I'm really very, very pleased that that's one of my favorite pieces, and that it now resides with the City of Auburn at the Mountain View Cemetery.
I really like that story because I think it shows a way that an artist and an arts administrator can really think through how can we make this work, and then the community embraces it and it can become part of a permanent collection, which is, I think, a really exciting thing for the City of Auburn to be able to take on this kind of project. How and or why did you change, or was your concept changed when you worked on the project? Oftentimes, public artists can apply for something and have a really strong sense of how they want to progress on a project, and then once they get in there and start digging around and learning about some of the limitations, but also some of the opportunities, things can really take a different direction. So I'd like Susan Zokla to talk a little bit about that, if possible. And I know that you have a new relationship with the person that maintains the grounds at the golf course, and someone who is very instrumental in making sure that her work was able to happen there.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. Rumor has it.
That sounds far more mysterious than it is, actually. Kevin Van is a person who works out at the golf course and was fantastic to work with, to help me install the works and in helping think about the siting of the work as well, because he's worked there 35 years and just had this very solid understanding, which I was able to rely on. And it really, that aspect, that collaborative aspect was really helpful for me. This project worked in a way similar to the process that I usually use, which is I work very intuitively, and I come and I looked around the golf course and spent time there and sort of dreamt, and I was so pleased that it was such an extraordinarily beautiful site. And then I just sort of started thinking of things and doing drawings. I just kept returning to this, the swing of just kind of the simplest but most elegant, for me, solution, which was just the beauty of the nature of golf itself. And the swing of a golf club and the trajectory of a ball. I dismissed it originally as like, oh, that's just too straightforward or something. But then, as I spent time with it, I felt like there was such potency to the imagery, and so that's sort of how the work evolved. And I have somewhat of a science background too, so I frequently look at sort of physics diagrams and whatnot, and I feel like nature is such an elegant, just recurrent, elegant imagery. And so I felt that the golf swing was like so many spirals in nature, and the trajectory was also kind of a form that it's like the most efficient thing will be very beautiful. So I was hoping that the piece is also read as not only a golf swing, but perhaps some kind of a plant form or it referenced something kind of alive and dynamic.
Great. And I think Susan's piece here, I know that when we originally talked about the site for her pieces, it wasn't where they ended up, which is a great example of how once you dive into something, things shift out of good reason. I mean, it sounds like they while working with the team, they really figured out that the site that we had spec'd was not really the ideal location for her work. I think also having a relationship with people and having the artists have the opportunity to really work closely with people like groundskeepers. They are the ones that will foster the work, take it forward, and make sure it's well maintained, that it doesn't end up with graffiti, and make sure that it has that is well cared for. And so I think it's really great when artists have the wherewithal to bring others into the process, into the creative process.
I thought I'd throw in kind of a funny little anecdotes about that piece that I did a long time ago, 93. But just to show that you have to be adaptable as a public artist. And when I first proposed it, it was just a mud field there on the banks of a White River. But I saw there were lots of boulders and rocks. And so the idea, which happened in some ways, but different than I thought, was I said I will incorporate some boulders from the site so the benches nestle within the boulders. And I come back later ready for installation, and first we have to do the boulders because I'm going to design the benches to fit exactly the contour of the boulders. And see, where can I get the boulders? And they say, we don't have any boulders. And I said, wait a minute, I mean, a few months ago you had all those boulders. And they said, no, we don't have any boulders. And it was very serious. There were no boulders. And so I said, what's happened to them? I said, well, we don't want to tell you, but they actually made big pits and buried all the boulders in the pits. They are right underneath you. And I said, you've got to be kidding. All those beautiful rocks are gone. Yeah, we don't have any more. You'll have to get your own. I said, well, that was not part of a deal. I mean, I don't have the money in that budget to buy and transport those big rocks. And I said, well, that's how it is. And so there was still some woods in the back. I went there, I said, I've got to find some rocks. And these were the only ones available. That's why probably the shapes there were not exactly my chosen ones. They looked like a hodgepodge of rock. But this is the reason why. Because all the beautiful rocks I had seen were gone, and these were the only ones available. So I worked around the ones I found, and that's how but they're from the site.
What was the main inspiration for your work?
The project that I'm working on is for the Les Gove Community Center, which has not started construction yet. Hopefully is going to start up again in January. And it's based on the idea of the two rivers coming together. The site is actually right over where the White River used to run, so it's right there and very specific. And my piece is pretty much integrated into the part of the architecture. But it was stimulated design-wise, formally, by the architecture as well as this community and geography aspect. And it has to do with the White River and the Green River coming together. And so it's kind of got two parts. The first part is the Green River flow, and that's going to be a piece that is suspended glass, green float glass shape. And it echoes a shape on the floor in the architecture, which is a river theme. And then the second part, which draws you through the space to the other door of the building, is based on the White River. And for that piece, it's going to be constructed out of salvaged wood. For the construction of this building, they had to take down some old cherry trees on 12th. And so I'm using the salvaged wood from that, taking down of that tree, to do a piece that is kind of a collage of this beautiful cherry wood. I was put in touch with a very interesting man locally named Dennis Swanson, and he actually sort of, I guess you'd call it, he found and restored an early portable mill from the early part of the 20th century, pioneer object, really. And he does this, it's a very interesting process out in his kind of backyard. He has set up this beautiful old mill, and so he milled the wood for me. And you can see this is the top. It says slicing off the tree. That's the cherry tree that came down. And then he sliced it up for me on a, not in the usual manner. It's a vertical cut. When I do this collage, I want to make sure that I take advantage of the grain of the wood to kind of to echo the notion of the flow of the river. And so that's going to be the visual kind of connection that I make with that wood. And I think that the idea of using the salvaged wood is a really interesting one for me, because it also brings up a question which I think is really interesting in public art these days, about using green technology, green objects and natural objects, and trying to incorporate more of that kind of work into public art. I mean, it's a big deal right now. Everybody's talking about green things, The new community center is a LEED building. It's eco-friendly processes that are in this green building. And so there's always this, it's kind of a whole notion about this attention to ecologically friendly processes and bringing that into public art as well. So this is kind of fun to use the salvaged wood. And
yeah, I think it's terrific. I think it's a way of using local resources, local people, local connections.
And I've met a whole bunch of wonderful people
and local trees, yes. And and building, again, that community within the art making process.
Yeah.
That's great. I know with Garth's piece, he was really dealing with an urban park and a gathering place. And Meg her work was really steeped in a lot of the history of the location, and I hope you can talk about that as well.
The favorite inspiration I like to think of is the heads that are on here. They were going to have bollards, because this used to be a street that you could drive through. And these bollards were to keep people from driving on the sidewalks. So that was one inspiration. And they used to be lined up, and I think they've gotten moved around a lot for seating, I don't know what, but a lot of people hang around there, which is great. And there were sort of or two styles, and there was one on each side, and they faced each other. So along with Philip's idea about entry and passage, it was sort of this more formal sort of passage. And then, so they needed bollards, and then the other inspiration was they were going to have trees. So then maybe they were going to have tree guards, and then maybe they were going to need tree grates. And so I figured out how to make tree guards and tree grates. And then the figures, I've done figures for a while. I like doing figures, so it seemed like a natural thing for me to do. And I just thought they would look good. And then somebody asked about the local influence in that whole thing there. That's directly out of the history book, which that little house on the bottom is a hops house, a hops drying house. So it was sort of, it was understood that something needed to be historical, so that's my historical part there. And the rest is just me having fun, so.
I think this is a really good example of how an artist can make a community unique by using the things that we always need, like tree grates, maybe bicycle racks, light poles, where an artist can come in and design that specifically for that community. And it doesn't look like any other place in the United States. It has a really unique identity, and I just think that's one of the top values of public art. So now we'll talk to Meg, who also brings a lot of research and history to her work.
Isaac Evans Park on the Green River was, when I became part of the project, just dirt. My first challenge was to find a message and convey it within the bounds of the budget. I also had to deal with a high level of vandalism that was going on at that time. So I was very concerned about having my piece survive this issue. I also wanted to work in stone, which was my medium. The subject was easy to come up with. Steelhead used to run strong in the Green River, and I felt drawn to their cause. The message was about the loss of habitat and the fact that steelhead were becoming endangered. This is me working. You can see my chisels. It was quite a process to carve black granite, but black granite is the strongest stone, and I thought it might survive the elements. I met a couple of people actually in the park when I was there and discovered that it really is loved and enjoyed by many visitors. I've been there in the middle of the day, and the park is packed with cars. People go, they sometimes sit in their car and just enjoy the beautiful park, or they go to the river, which is a few feet away.
So I just can attest to the durability of your work since I've seen it. It's very close to Susan Zocola's new piece. It's right across the roadway there, and if you haven't already seen it, and it's in an amazingly good shape. I'd like to talk about what drives you to make public art. Why do you feel that this is the way you need to express yourself? What are sort of the challenges, the joys, the things that you sit in your studio at night and say, why do I do this? Why?
Public art is different from private art. Public art isn't private art in public places. But we live in a culture in which we have galleries and museums, and they aren't always accessible to everybody else, where public art is really more accessible to everybody else. And one of the reasons among many that an artist will do art is for other people to enjoy what they're doing, not in an ego sense, but if you're passionate about what you do, you want to share that passion, and in the public is a greater arena for doing this.
For me, my parents immigrated from Finland, and I grew up partially in Finnish American communities, and the Finnish experience is very different from the American one. Everybody does things together. To have one Finn is like it's not a Finn anymore. And the thing in America is that everybody is so individualistic. What I like about public art is maybe trying to bring some of that idea of community. And then it's just fun to work together with, when I did my piece, I was able to work with the gardener, and he did a dry waterbed. So the funds were funneled into, instead of doing plantings, into making this dry waterbed. So it was fun to hang out with him, and then you hang out with the structural engineers and the fabricators and the software person who puts your designs into a water jet printer. And so you have a community experience in the creation, and then you hope that afterwards you've done something to pull people together a little bit.
For me, I see a big difference, I think, between the art that I create for a gallery and the public art. When I create art for a gallery, definitely, of course, I hope that somebody will connect with it, like Phil was saying, but I'm satisfying myself, basically. I just want to throw out any ideas that come to my head, and I'm not looking whether it's going to be safe, it's going to be PC, it's going to be long-lasting, or all those things that we require, for public art. But when public art, the satisfaction for me is to see the people react to my work, and maybe it's not as way out as you would like to have it as an artist, because you have limitation, but for many people, it's something they have never seen before, and that they react to it is so important. Even if they react negatively, I think sometimes. For my piece here, in the center, they are in the center bench. There are two white panels, And on those white panels is lettering, which has terms having to do with the salmon migration and fishing. And I decided, because it was an Indian fishing ground, that I would put the words in English and then the translation in Lushootseed language, which was the language of that area. And people have defaced the panel, and they didn't like the fact that I was bringing something that to them seemed foreign, even though it was before English. But but the fact that they reacted to it, to me, is good, because I think nowadays we go around, the suburbs look the same, the shopping malls look the same, and people are kind of blasé and just walk through this maze. This country is so big, and yet sometimes you can't tell the difference in a shopping mall in the Northwest or in Florida, for that matter. And so the fact that people are reacting to artwork is really good. I think gets their brain going, and we need that. We all need that.
I think part of it for me is being of service. There's something good about that. And the other thing that I like, just that you can do something that people appreciate, that can make their day better, which I can't believe that happens from my work, but people have said that. And the other thing that I love and hate about it is that it gets me out into the world, because my default is to just, stay in my studio, but I have to go out into the world and meet people and do things, which I really like. So, it's healthy for me too. So hopefully it works both ways.
I hadn't been down to visit my work for quite a while. When I got the invitation to come to this, I decided I should check in and see how the pieces were surviving. And when my friend and I arrived, we caught a fellow standing in front of it and really admiring it. And I was a little bit shocked, happy and shocked. And anyway, it was nice to see that. A while later, I came back wanting to photograph it again, and somebody else came along, and I asked this fellow if he would mind helping me, and he said, "I love those pieces," and he did not know that I was the artist. I was just, somebody there photographing them. And that was just so exciting to me that he said that.
Well, I think just the fact that you can come across people that appreciate your work, and I think a lot of people who are normally on the stage, they are used to accolades and people applauding, and I think artists that are working in their studios, presenting in galleries, they often don't have that same kind of fulfillment. And I think when a public artist can walk up and see children interacting with their work, or some guy that's been sitting in his truck for a long time just staring at him, that can be really fulfilling. And it's the one time that visual artists, I think, can really get that kind of gratification. And I think it's great when you have that unsolicited support of your work too. It's one thing if you're in a gallery and people are like, "Oh, I love your work, nice show." But I think when you see people interacting with it and really enjoying it without them having any idea that you're the artist, that's, I think, got to be very satisfying. Are there things that you would pass along to emerging public artists, people that are wanting to get into the business, as they say? How did you get started? Like, what really got you your first commission? How did you move from maybe studio gallery work into this field?
I guess for me it was more of an evolutionary process where I've always liked to build things, and when I was in the 20s, I was fortunate enough to start working for my father. And for about 20 years I worked in the studio, and he did public art, a lot of public art. So from 70 to 90, he did a lot of fountains, and I ended up grinding, pushing the broom, and eventually all the fabrication. So I think that's, I was very fortunate. So in the process, there were other people that worked there, and I've had kids in the studio, teenagers come in, some of them are kind of dropping out or something like that. But they all had kind of a unique skill, and I think that anything that I could pass on was being able to take those natural abilities and create something, you know, through the ideas of craftsmanship. And I think, you know, everything's changing now with, you know, technology and all that. You see kids that are innately good at computers or handwork, but I think that all kind of fits together, and I think passing on some of those skills are what I encourage, and I see happen a lot of the young people I meet. It's kind of fun mentoring, you know, because I felt that I was mentored in that same way.
Do you have any of the rest of you served as a mentor or had studio assistants where you were really kind of guiding them through this initial launching phase?
Well, can I just say that I got my start in public art because there was a wonderful program at Bellevue Community College of the Art Zones, and Virginia was teaching it.
Oh.
And so my first public art was a group project with her, and it was really an incredible program.
Studio art is such a lonely occupation, and for me the beauty of public art is being able to be in communication with other people. And yes, I started with the people there at Bellevue Community College, this program for public art, and it was so nice because it was for me a beautiful thing to be able to be with people who were already artists, like Ingrid was already an artist, but to sort of find a pathway into this more public, this more interactive group, you know, kind of a project. It introduces you to new materials. It allows you to learn so much. Every project is a huge learning experience. I mean, you get to try new materials. It's just an open and really pleasant kind of process because you're trying new things. You're learning new skills. You're always exploring, and it's very seductive in many ways. I haven't given up the studio work, and I think it oftentimes it's a good thing to have the studio as your workshop, as your laboratory in a way. But then to be able to work out into the public and to interact with other people, it's really very, very nice, very pleasant. Good.
Both those last two comments are right on, that I think you have to learn your craft and you have to develop your own dealing with ideas. To me, one of the main center of being an artist is you're a problem solver. Admittedly, you make up your own problems, but that's part of it. It's the excitement of trying to solve problems. And when you have a sense of solving problems as you've learned your craft and dealt with the ideas in your own work, and a possible commission comes up, you have to say, what's the problem here? What do I have to deal with? And all the discussions we've had so far from my fellow artists here have talked about what are the issues you had to deal with. You had location, you had size, you had budget, you had the community you're dealing with, you had so many other concerns you had to deal with. Those are all problems to solve. And you do those while what you've learned in your studio is how to solve problems, bringing your aesthetic to these solutions. That's how I would give advice to a young person.
Great. Yeah, Michelle?
Well, I think it is difficult to jump from being a studio artist into becoming a public artist, unless maybe like Jerry was really accustomed to how it was working, because seeing his father seeing it, so you gradually learned the way to do it. But I remember thinking, how can I get into getting some of those jobs? And luckily the Washington Arts Commission had really a nice program where they had competition and you could apply for some projects, and some were very low budget. So as a beginning artist in public art, you could apply to those little projects, hoping that you would. But still, it is a consideration. Everybody wants experience. Well, you have to start somewhere before you get the experience. So I remember, first public art project I was applying through the Washington State Arts Commission. I thought I have to show them that I can do something really big, because that's what the art project is. So I built this kind of fancy play structure for my kids. And it was very imaginative and probably not very safe, but it looked really like fun. And that was the only big piece I had. And I said, see, I can make a big piece too. And I did actually get a job, my first public art job from that. So I think if you want it badly, you try to figure out, how can I convince those people? I know I can do it, but I have to convince them. And so it's very important to...
So you sacrifice the safety of your children.
Well, only a neighbor kid broke an arm. My kid. Oh, no.
No, I think that's a great example of how I've talked to artists about kind of transitioning into public art from studio art, figuring out, can you build something in your backyard and photograph it? I mean, when, we're presenting work to a selection panel, often they're not particularly interested in the exact location, and if it's your backyard or a neighbor's yard or something, it can really convey your ability to deal with scale and materials.
Okay. And to close the loop, this summer I've had the opportunity to show about 20 emerging artists, just to give them 2 or 3 hours at Westlake Park to do a temporary public art project. That's and everybody has done way more work than they need to, but it's it's a chance to do an installation.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, Ingrid's working on a really terrific project with the Parks Department, and I think temporary public works, of course, is another ideal way to transition. And Susan?
Well, I would echo pretty much what everybody else has said. I work in the studio still, and I feel like it's kind of it's important to kind of keep that part of one's work, for me anyway, going. And I have a studio assistant who is sort of she's just out of Cornish and sort of thinking about trying to get into public art. And so we get in these conversations, and I find myself sort of articulating what it is I like about doing public art and why it's different than studio work. For me, it's that opportunity to work with a site and to want to collaborate with other people, and I'm constantly surprised. I'm learning new stuff, and I think that if an artist wants those experiences, they're well suited to it. But I also think applying to things that, like she's looking at, listings, and I go, if she gets excited about it, like if it just seems like it suits you, go for it. Just apply and try it and write a cover letter. And I think getting something that you get some excitement about initially would be terrific.
Yeah, I think applying for things, and you all probably back me up on this, but just putting yourself out there every time you're interested, it exposes you not only to the selection panel, but to the arts administrators working. And they might keep you in mind for a project down the road, or that the panelists might start seeing, just becoming more familiar with your work. So that's something as an administrator that I see a lot, is just apply. So do any of you work, sounds like Susan has a studio assistant, does anyone else work as a mentor?
Sharing information is what an artist friend of mine once said, if you know something, you're obligated to pass it on. So I think there's a sense of mentoring in all of us here, that we're not precious about hiding information or knowledge or information.
Trade secrets.
Trade secrets, right.
Well, I think besides what having an assistant or passing it on directly, you do not know what influence you have, and sometimes it's very strange that it comes out. I was taking some work to a gallery in San Juan Island and sitting on the ferry, and a young woman sits next to me. And she said, well, you live on San Juan Island? No, I live on another island. I live on Bainbridge Island. She says, oh, Bainbridge Island. She said, I used to live there. I said, oh, okay. And she said, well, what are you doing on San Juan Island? Well, I'm taking some artwork to a gallery. She said, what's your name? So I tell her. And she says, oh, when I was a Girl Scout, I came to your studio, and after that, I was so excited, I started taking art classes, and I became a ceramist, and I thought, oh, okay, I would never have guessed,
That's
some
amazing.
Little Girl Scout that influenced by it.
That's great, yeah. So I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience, if you have some for us.
Garth, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were and what the process was like when your work was repainted on the B Street Plaza.
Actually, I'm responsible for that color. So they were black originally, which they sort of seemed ominous, and so I just thought, I think I'll try color. So that was how you got that color. Do you like it, or do you?
I like the black better.
I heard there was talk about paint. I heard there was talk about repainting them black. So
I had a huge sculpture repainted.
Yeah, you had a huge sculpture repainted.
I did. It was a big five-shaped piece that I did for a school in Chewelah, Washington. It was Corten steel, which gets a lovely rust color over the years. And we went up to visit it some years ago. And it was painted a gorgeous blue. And I thought, well, that's quite nice. These are the school colors.
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name is Greg Watson. I'm a local school teacher. And I was wondering, a couple of you have spoken to the idea of doing research prior to doing a piece that's going to go into a particular location or a particular community. If anybody would like to expand, or anyone else would like to make some comments, I'm curious about the process of whether you think about trying to bring local heritage or local existing culture and making that resonate through public art as a means of sort of reinforcing or saying something new about what you find about the history of a community or place that you make the pieces for.
Last year I did a piece, bronze sculpture for the Cap Santee Marina in Anacortes. And it was a competition, so everybody, I was a finalist, and made the cut, so I did my proposal and I started doing my research. And after looking at a lot of old history of the area, Anacortes was originally intended to be like Seattle or Tacoma. They thought the railroad was going to end there. And there was a lot of speculation going on. And there was a man named Thomas Bowman, and he was an early founder of the city of Anacortes. And his wife's name was Annie Curtis. And all those names up there in the Fidalgo Island, and all these have a very Spanish name, so he changed Annie Curtis to Anacortes. And most people don't realize that, and a lot of locals didn't realize that. And so he had the property across the way, and he called it Cap Santee. So a little bit more research, and Cap Santee was Annie Curtis's family summer retreat on the St. Lawrence River. So when they came west to Anacortes, of course it wasn't, they named that big rock across the marina from Anacortes Cap Santee. And the marina people didn't even know that where the name for their marina came from. The Port Commission and all that were real happy to find out all this. So so I did a 20-foot bronze there, and it was the Annie Curtis. But I really like to do that kind of research. You know, a lot of things are not that deep, but that one was kind of a fun experience to dig around.
Every project that you do in public art needs to have research. You have to go around, and because everything is site specific, it's related to that place. So you have to go to the museums, you have to, find whatever kind of resources you can. The community can be a wonderful resource about stories and history. But it also brings up the fact that the artist interprets that history in the use of symbols, or in not necessarily like a written or photographic reference. They use those things as a way then to interpret their art into that site. So it can be maybe a little bit more mysterious, but it is an interesting thing because, of course, when the more people can communicate or understand what the art is about, if it's a more symbolic piece, the more they're going to enjoy it, the more they're going to feel invested, the more they're going to feel part of the community and part of the site.
I think that one thing that I see public art having the ability to do is to get people to ask why. If they look at something like Virginia's proposed piece, when you walk into the community center, I would hope that a student would look at the glass or look at the floor pattern and just ask, why is this here? And maybe they see something in it that does allude to water, and then they start thinking about water, what was here, what is the history of this place. So kind of creating that questioning. That's what I see.
My name is Robert Whale. I work for the Auburn Reporter. I just wondered how many of you are finally and fully satisfied with the things you've done. I'm talking about the initial idea you have, the difference between quicksilver and lead, the idea that flits through your mind, and then it actualized.
When I was growing up in Denver, the masthead of the Denver Post said, "There is no hope for the satisfied man." I think as human beings, we're like coral. We accrete something every day. We're a different person from one minute to the next, let alone after finishing a piece of art. We're a different person. So there's always going to be a certain sense of critical response to say, I'll do the next one better, or if this is an idea worth pursuing again.
Besides the boulders not being exactly the shape I had intended to, I was very happy with my piece. I thought it fit really well there. But you have to remember also that the sites change. So when I made that piece, I wanted it to be a landmark because it was so flat. So I thought I need something that height, and it was flat and just mud. And a gathering point, so that's why I created those benches, and so it would be somewhere where people could go to. There was no place to go, no goal along the banks. And then I returned today, and that piece previously looked extremely tall and really a landmark. And today the trees have grown, and it looks very small all of a sudden. So if I created a piece today for that very same park, it probably would be different. But I was happy at the time, and of course you create better pieces. You try to create better pieces over time. So it's a process.
I worked with that project of those 50 pieces for 4 years, and it was a learning curve all the way along, from a photograph to how do I create something that feels like stone, and how do I transfer print that and then distress it. And it kind of evolved through just pure experimentation. And once I kind of had the bugs worked out of the system of how to build one, it takes about 40 hours and 30, 40 steps to build one of those pieces, and had all 50 completed. I am done with that series now, and done with the challenge. So now I have a new project I'm working on, and it's a new set of challenges, a new set of problems. Someone mentioned earlier problem solving, and it truly that's the excitement now, is new terrain and new experiments and a fresh approach and new eyes at a new project too. So I'm excited about the learning curve of starting all over again, being a beginner again, and working out the bugs.
It's also interesting, that question that you asked, because it's a question they ask the artists when you're on a selection panel, when you are selected as a finalist for a project. They want to know, how do you intend to make your work timeless? How do you if you're considering you want your work to be meaningful for a long time, what do you do? Now, this is a very strange question, I think, because things do change, But if you look at the great works of art, I guess you have to consider, what is it that makes something timeless? I don't even really know what the answer to that question is. My answer is always that I work in a more strongly symbolic, more non-objective way. So it is not so much about identifying images within a particular style, but trying to keep an eye on a strong design and more formal qualities that don't have to do with particular time and space. But there are things that are obviously figurative that are timeless as well.
Well, and I think in public art, it seems like there's so much time between when the artist has that initial proposal and then the community members, the research, the different fabricators and consultants that they may work with, an engineer. All of those people may really bring in things that inform the development of that process, and I think it could be really different than what the artist originally thought it would be.
What are the answers to that question that you hear that you like?
The timeless question?
What's the real answer?
Maybe Cap can answer. I don't know.
Yeah, where's Cap?
There's no real answer. I think just that you're right, though. It does come up often in interviews. But I think that communities want to know that what they get out of the artist is going to be unique to their community.
Oh, yeah.
And that it's not something that they will see in every other suburban setting or urban setting.
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake to ever think you're doing anything timeless. I think you're peeing up a rope or something like that.
Yeah, no
you know, if that's your attitude on making art, go do something else.
Yeah.
I actually, unfortunately, have to wrap this up. I want to thank each and every one of the artists here. Thank you so much. We invited all the artists that have artwork here in Auburn. We have a little over 20 pieces in our collection. We have a new brochure out, so if you didn't pick it up on the way in, do pick it up. Heather, thank you very much for being our moderator today.
Thank you, and thank you to all the artists.
And, yeah. As always, I always like to thank the City of Auburn and Auburn Council for always making art an integral part of the community here. And I want to especially thank For Culture for being our 25th anniversary partner with the Arts Commission this year. So thank you again. Let's give them a little applause. So without further ado, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for attending Walk the Talk, Public Art in Auburn. I thank you all for showing up tonight.